Hey and a warm welcome. This video is a compilation of all of the custom blueprints videos that I did over the past few weeks, and it is your one and only ultimate guide to understand how to build custom blueprints in December 2023. Have fun watching and let me know if you have any questions or feedback. Bye bye. Hey, welcome. In this video we're going to look at give a first look at the CodeCatalyst Blueprints. That is the new functionality that has been announced in at reInvent 2023, and I believe that this custom blueprints functionality that CodeCatalyst gets is going to really change the way that we interact with CodeCatalyst, especially in an enterprise use case. So let's get started. So the way that you can access blueprints, the blueprints are currently available on the enterprise tier only. So if you look at the pricing page, you will see that these custom blueprints are not included in the free or in the standard version. You will need to upgrade to the enterprise tier to access the blueprints. I'm pretty lucky because the CodeCatalyst team has enabled the blueprints for me to in one of our spaces. So as you know, I'm an AWS hero, and in that space that we have for the heroes, we have the blueprints enabled to be able to give it a try and give you a very honest feedback on how this actually works. So how do you access them? You go to the space settings today, and over there you will now have a new icon over here which is called blueprints. If you look at this in a different space, so let me just quickly show that to you. If I go to a space that does not have this thing enabled, you will see in the settings that the blueprints shows you need to change to an enterprise tier. As I said, I'm fortunate to be able to try this out and also to talk to you about how this actually works. So if you don't have the enterprise tier enabled on your CodeCatalyst space, then this is your chance to see how this actually looks. So let's get started and let's create our own blueprint. And this is going to be pretty interesting because the blueprints under the hood use the same functionality as setting up a blueprint by your own or as setting up a project by your own. So let's call this a demo blueprint. And we will change the name. And we're going to start with an empty application, and the author name is going to be AWS Heroes. Well, and then I can add some tags to this one as well. So let's go with TypeScript, and let's go with sample app. The package name, I'm just going to leave it to be BP for demo. And once I click over here and create the blueprint, what is going to happen is that in the background, CodeCatalyst is going to set up a project for us. So yes, it is a project in the same way that you would be setting up a project. It just has a small different marker that actually shows you that this is a blueprint project. This also gives this project the possibility to later publish a blueprint. So let's go back to how does this look like. So as you can see over here, back in the settings, we see the space blueprints were 5. If I now reload this, it should be still 5, right? Why? Because the project has been set up, as you can see over here with the standard setup. The project does have some workflows. It also has the blueprint release workflow, but this is still in progress, which is why CodeCatalyst right now does not really know about the blueprint yet. So the moment that this initial workflow finishes, now it's going to publish a blueprint, which is a new action that has been added as part of this release as well. And the moment that this step finishes, I'm going to be able to see my space blueprint over here as well. Now, workflow finishes, blueprint is going to be available over here. That does not make the blueprint available to your end users yet. You will need to add that blueprint to your catalog, blueprint catalog, before you can actually use that. So let me just quickly show you what that means. If I go to my hero space, and if I create a project with the new functionality, now I can start with the blueprint and then select the space blueprints. As I just mentioned, our new blueprint that we just created is not yet available over here, but there are a few that I have already created before. You can see the tags over here that I added. And I will go back to this in a minute when our workflow has been finished. So let's give it some time and I'll be right back. Okay, now the blueprint publish has finished. So this is, as I said, the initial workflow that will actually publish the blueprint. Every time that you push something to the main branch for the blueprint project, we will now be able to see the blueprint over here in the blueprints within the settings. So we can now see the BP for demo over here. And clicking on it will actually give us the details around the project and the versions, and also the projects that are using this blueprint, which obviously is none. Description is pretty simple over here. But now, if we try to create a project in this space, we are still not able to see this blueprint, right? So let's have a look over here. We can see it's still not there. If I now want to make this available, and this is pretty cool, I can now go over here and say add blueprint to catalog or make catalog version, right? And this will now put this version of the project of the blueprint into the catalog. And now I will also be able to actually see this over here. Now I can start building a project based on this blueprint, which is going to be pretty boring, right? But I'm going to dive deep on different other options that you have over here, and setting and, well, deciding about the blueprint. This is a pretty basic example over here, right? So let's just leave this first video at about blueprints, where we are on how do you get your blueprint set up, how do you add that blueprint then to a catalog so you can actually build a project from it, and then yeah, let's dive deeper into how to build project as a blueprints in the next video. So thanks a lot for watching, and yeah, see you back soon. So now we are going to look at what the project structure for a blueprint project looks like. So as we have seen before, we have now created that space blueprint over here. And I've already mentioned that this is now going to be just a traditional project within the current space. So within my projects, I now have my demo blueprint project over here, right? Which has a source code repository in the same way that you would want to have that for a usual blueprint. You can also see that there is some description around it. You can also see that this is deferred from a blueprint builder project. So this is a blueprint, right, which has been updated 2 hours ago. So this is something that the Amazon CodeCatalyst team maintains. You also see that over here we have a source code repository. A source code repository, it has the blueprint for demo, and within that source code repository, which I can obviously clone and edit locally as well, I have a whole setup of the project. It's as it said. You can see that this comes from has a Progen RC. You can see that there is over here in the source file, we have the wizard configurations and the blueprint TS. We have static assets, which is an example of for this blueprint. And the most important piece where you actually will be starting to develop the blueprint is going to be in blueprint.ts, because this describes how the result of the blueprint is going to look like. And if you remember from the previous meeting, this has the options as an example, describe the wizard information, right? So if you look at this, where we are creating a project from our blueprint, you will see that here you have the environment title area, you have the account information that are being selected, you then have a nested input, a nested hidden input, or you have a drop down over here, right? And this is essentially what is described in this options interface over here, where you do have the environment settings. You then have a nested piece, which has certain information added as tags, and it then has the drop down over here. Then down here you will see that we have an exported class called Blueprint, which extends a parent blueprint. And this is now where we're going to define on what is going to be the contents of our target project. In this very simple example, and we're going to deep dive into other possibilities and variations later, you can see that here everything that is in the static assets directory is going to be copied, right? This static asset is a class that is exposed by the Blueprint SDK. And it reads all of the files in the static assets directory. In our example, it finds all of them, it iterates through them, and it creates a new source file within the source code repository that I created up here, and copies them over there. Down here you can see the workflow builder, which is actually building a workflow, which is going to be, this is my first workflow. And it's going to be triggered on the main branch. You can also see the actions that are being added over here. And this workflow builder is then used to create a new workflow. Now, with this workflow, let's see if we understand after using the blueprint on how this kind of combines into the project that we have. So I'm going to just go back to where we went to create project. I'm going to create a project out of this blueprint, and we're going to see, look at the results. So I can now see the workflow by clicking on create workflow, the workflows that are being created over here. As you can see, this is really what we saw over here with do something in an action, right? This is exactly what we see over here. We are then also able to go back here and see the actual code that is going to be produced, with the name of the source code repository being code, the workflow, including our workflow definition, and the def file, the main py, and the markdown. Markdown. And this is the powerful thing of blueprints as well. You can see what is going to be rendered as well before you actually then use that. So you know what you get, right? So now let's click on that. And with that, we're going to see that this is now behaving just as a standard blueprint that we know from before. But it is using our piece of code that we just created a few minutes ago. And I think this is really a very good starting point for building up your own blueprint. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about composable blueprints and how this custom blueprint functionality can be used to actually create complex project structures in one go, right? So in this project now, we see, as I said, there's a source code repository, which we named code, which has been created. There is workflow that has been created. This is my workflow. As it looks like, I've integrated an arrow over here, which is okay. The reason here is that I've set up an environment name, but I've not really matched that up into any deployment targets or things like that, right? Because my inputs were wrong for the blueprint. I will also see now that this is coming from this blueprint, right? Which obviously I only can then edit because I'm an administrator for this space. But once again, this is really now a true project. So now what we see in the projects over here is that we have our demo recording create from Blueprint, which is a standard project, and we have our demo blueprint down here, which is actually blueprint, the blueprint project that we can also edit. So this is the overview on how the blueprint projects at the end look like. I'm now going to pause and stop this recording, and we'll work on the next video where we're actually going to implement our first change for the blueprint. I'm going to talk a little bit about the developer experience there. And if you have any questions or anything you would like to know in more details around this one, please let me know. And you know how to reach me, or add a comment to the video over here. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day. So we're back into CodeCatalyst, and now we're going to look at how the actual blueprint code looks like that we created. For that, we're going to jump back into the demo blueprint project that we created, which is an actual blueprint. and in there we are now going to look at the existing source code that we have. And for that, I'm going to jump over into the source code repository. And obviously I could bring up a dev environment right now, but I'm still more the local development person. So I'm going to copy the Git URL. Then I'm going to go to my local folder, doing a git clone. And this is now has downloaded my blueprint code. As you can see, I've been building some stuff for the next videos already, but for today we're going to look at the folder that we just imported. I think we called that BP for demo. Yeah, so let's have a look. BP for demo. Yes, of course, I trust the CodeCatalyst team for creating Seeker code, and now we can see what the structure of this one is. We have a README, which is the description of my blueprint. We have a getting started page, which gives us some details around how to get started. This page is unfortunately not yet open sourced at the time of recording this video, but I hope that when you look at this, you might be able to access this wiki, which was probably going to have a lot of details around how to build blueprints. For today, we'll need to live with what we have. This one exposes using yarn over here, but I know, and because I've tried that before, that I'm also able to do npm, use npm, which is what I usually use. So let's go deep into that project, and let's do npm install for now. This is going to install my packages and dependencies. While we do that, let's have a look on the project structure. So over here we have our CodeCatalyst folder, which has the blueprint release workflow. It actions some specific things, as you can see over here. And then we also see that it uses the publish blueprint action, which is natively built by the CodeCatalyst team. We have the project directory. Please don't touch anything over here. This is because it's generated code. We have details around the package and project JSON. I don't want to touch that right now, but keep in mind, if you want to change anything, always do that in the project RC, because this is going to be used if you regenerate your code ever again. We then have the static assets directory. As I already mentioned in the video that we had before, this is really important because this is where you can store static assets that you want to reuse as part of your code. This will be essentially also the place to store your CDK code, your Lambda function code, or anything that you later want to deploy. In the source directory, you now see that there is a blueprint.ts. This is going to be the main file of everything that you do in your blueprint, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more details. And we have an index.json, which essentially only exports the blueprint and the defaults. And we have a default.json, which sets the defaults for the different parameters. And we have wizard configurations, which we can then use to execute specific tests. Over here in the blueprints file, there's some explanation on how this actually works. You also can see that the referred npm package is the Amazon CodeCatalyst and then blueprints component workflow, which you can also find in your npm package library if you want to look into the details. As I've executed npm install over here, I will now also be able to look into the different interfaces and actually what the types that the team has exposed, and this is really helpful as long as the wiki is not yet available. I already showed you last time that the options translate to a specific part of the wizard. We have this nested piece, and I don't really like nested stuff, so I'm gonna just get rid of this and remove this from our wizard. I have my blueprint class over here, which has a constructor. The constructor does do specific things. It initializes the types, as you can see over here. It initializes a source code repository, which has the name code. I don't really like that, so let's change that and make it a blueprint demo. Then this blueprint collects all of the static assets, so everything that is within this static assets directory. How do I know that? Well, I can jump into this class, and here I will see that is going to traverse against around the static assets directory. And then it's going to create a new source file within this given repository, and it's going to, in the path of this asset, store the content of the asset. This is pretty powerful, right? Because here I can also start and do some and change and modify the content of this one. So even though this is a static asset today, I could now change the Python file here and do some replacements as well. Over here you then see that the environment is being built. You see that there is a workflow builder that is triggered on the main branch. So let's change the name of this workflow and make it a main workflow. Then the branch trigger for this one is main. And obviously we need to write this somehow to a workflow file, which is being done down here in the same way as project constructs are being used. We then also define a setup of workspace, and this workspace can be used later to use that in your dev environment if you ever want to use that in the project that you've generated from that. This seems pretty simple. It's TypeScript code today. I don't think that I ever need anything else with TypeScript because everyone should be writing TypeScript today. But now what I can do with this one is I can do npm run blueprint synth, and this is going to synthesize the blueprint locally and drive it in a way and generate it in a way that I will be able to look at the code that is being generated out of this. So if we now look at the results of the synth, we will now see locally on how this generated code is going to look like if we ever use this within within CodeCatalyst itself. As you can see here, we have generated a source directory which is named blueprint demo. Over there we have a dev file, we have a main, we have a markdown, we have the CodeCatalyst here. Now the workflow has the name main workflow. This is essentially what we did over here, right? So you can really see that you can replicate what CodeCatalyst does with the corresponding blueprint definition over here and translates that to how this proposed bundle will look like in the moment that you use this blueprint within CodeCatalyst. And this is pretty powerful because it speeds up your local development workflow. I'll leave it with that as a short introduction into how the code looks like in CodeCatalyst. Now, in order to publish this, there is two different options. I can execute npm blueprint double column preview to generate a preview version and put this into the catalog, put this into the CodeCatalyst environment as long as I'm an administrator. But I can also just do an npm push, git push, and push this into the CodeCatalyst environment, which is when the workflow that we looked at earlier, the blueprint release workflow, is actually going to be triggered and is going to produce a new version of the blueprint if you are on the main branch. A lot of more stuff to say. As you can see, you can directly get started by just changing the blueprint TS, then add this to Git, push this to CodeCatalyst itself, and then you're going to have a new version of this blueprint. So thanks a lot for watching this short introduction into the blueprint sources, and I'm looking forward to tell you more and teach you more about how blueprints can be used and can be adjusted to be more successful. Hello and welcome again to this next video about Amazon CodeCatalyst blueprints, and especially custom blueprints. And today we're going to start not within CodeCatalyst, but start with a little bit of a diagram. For me, if I want to talk about blueprint and if I want to explain what a blueprint actually is, this starts with visualizing what the contents of a blueprint are. You can see that on this diagram over here. I'm going to quickly walk you through the components of a blueprint that you build is on the one side. What is the master blueprint that this is dependent on? There's always one. A blueprint never starts kind of from scratch. At least I've not really seen that. There might be a possibility to do that, but I would advise against it. You should always start from a master blueprint. By default, this is going to be the blueprint builder, the custom blueprint builder that actually the CodeCatalyst team provides to you. And you can see that if you go to one of your blueprints, that custom blueprints that you have been building, if you go to the blueprints on the left hand side, you will now see that there is always a blueprint named Blueprint Builder with the author Amazon CodeCatalyst, and that has a specific version. This is important to keep in mind. You shouldn't start from scratch. Always start with an existing blueprint. Now, the blueprint can then build up for you project configuration, any kind of. This includes environments, setting up dev environments, setting up workspaces, maybe also going forward setting up packages and stuff like that, and all of the details that are required to make your project kind of live. It also includes generating source code repositories, and this can be multiple ones as well. And as part of that, and I've pulled that out because this is pretty important, you can also generate workflows within those source code repositories. So you can predefine on what a project is going to look like from a workflows perspective. When generating source repositories, you can also generate code, and this is really cool because you're not limited to the amount and the style of code that you're actually generating. Custom blueprints use TypeScript today, and I don't think that we need anything else but TypeScript to generate code, but you can generate any kind of code. So I've been using this one to generate TypeScript code, as well as generate Flutter code, as well as just generate JSON files that I'm potentially going to use later. With that, this is what a blueprint can do. What you need to keep in mind is that the more you do in a blueprint, the more complex the blueprint code itself will be. Now, that might be difficult to understand, right? The more things that you do in building up your project structure, the harder it will be to actually find errors in the blueprint generation or the execution of it. So with my experiences of starting to work on blueprints and building my own one, I think I kind of try to make the blueprints smaller if possible. And this means that you can have a use case of having a blueprint that only sets up the project configuration. So this means a blueprint that is only responsible for setting up development environments, for setting up AWS accounts within your project, and to set up the roles and permissions that are able to access the project. This can be done with a blueprint. You can then have a second blueprint that sets up all of your source repositories. Then you can have a blueprint that sets up the workflows within a repository. Now, you can also have a blueprint that sets up everything, which makes it complex, as I already said, but you can also have blueprints that only add specific workflows. Think of the use case of having a security team that wants to do specific verifications on the source code that is produced. They can build this custom blueprint, and you as a user, you will be able to apply that to your project. Then you can also use that going forward to have additional verifications when doing deployments and stuff like that. So this sounds very complicated from my perspective. So I decided let's, instead of just look at this diagram, let's look at something that I can build and that I can give to you as an input on how you could leverage to build blueprints. So here's what I looked at. I wanted to build a blueprint that starts with that blueprint master. Then I decided to implement 3 different blueprints. And with that, we're going to have one project at the end. I have one blueprint which is going to be focused on having an API gateway, so the master piece of the API gateway being implemented and being added to the source code. Assuming that this will be TypeScript, it will have a Lambda function behind that API gateway, and it will have a package JSON, and it will be written in CDK. This blueprint will be added once to our project. I can then build a blueprint that will add an additional API gateway. And well, here we need to watch out. This is not an API gateway itself. This is an API gateway path that we're building. So what this means is initially we will have an API gateway that doesn't have any path. Then we can add a path. And now as a different team or as a new team is building out a new path in the blueprint, in that API gateway, let's say I want to get accounts, and I want to get users, and I want to get credits, right, as 3 different paths. I can now add this blueprint multiple times to the project. And this empowers me to make sure that within the blueprint, I define all of the standards that I have for this path, like course setup, maybe encryption, maybe connectivity. And they are all put into the project at the same time. I'm going to show how that works as well a little bit later. And then last but not least, I have my security team. This security team wants to ensure that there is a dedicated workflow that is executed before we actually deploy our stuff out. So they are going to introduce a mandatory workflow that needs to be executed, and that needs to be green before actually a deployment can happen successfully. So from an architecture perspective, how does this look like? The blueprint, the main API blueprint is going to add an API gateway. It's going to add an endpoint, and it's going to add a Lambda function that shows some info stuff. It's going to add some workflows that actually triggers the deployment later. We have the security team blueprint that will add workflows to verify the security posture of our source code. And we have a sub API blueprint, which can be added multiple times, that now has the possibility to have a path or an endpoint added to the existing API gateway. And besides that, the user can now choose between having a Lambda integration or having a DynamoDB integration. Once again, there's going to be additional workflows added over here to ensure that the code that is added is also verified and tested as adding this to the project. This is already really complicated. I've managed to get this kind of implemented, and I hope that I will be able to walk you through some pieces of that code as well going forward. So if you're now excited to look at the code, I'm going to let you wait for 1 or 2 more minutes because I'm going to record this as a separate video as well. But before we do that, let's have a short look on how the project setup now looks like. So I'm now in my From API Blueprint project, which is actually, going back to this video, to this picture, is this green project. I've now added this main API blueprint, I've added the API blueprint gateway, and I've added the security blueprint. As you can see, in my project, the 3 of them are added. We have the main one, we have the API one, and we have a blueprint for the security team. What I'm going to try now is I'm going to try to add an additional version of the API and see if this actually builds out a new path. So let's do that. We go to Space Blueprints because that's where we already have the blueprints added. You see I did a few changes like 2 hours ago. Let's go to select that additional API blueprint. Now this will generate my code and will show me the different options that I've added to my corresponding wizard. Here's a generated main API ID. This is right now not really working, but here I can add a new path that I want to add actually to my project. So let's call that Misfits. Okay, so now we will see that as soon as I change this one, the code changes are going to be generated that will be applied to my project. So this means it's going to change existing MD files. This is not perfect yet, right? It's going to change this added blueprint stuff. It's going to create a new workflow that actually has this misfits in it. It's going to create a new stack that has this misfits in it as well, right? It has the path over here. It is adding that path and it's using that sub API construct. It's then going to override an existing API construct that is already there. This is something that I might need to change as well going forward. And it's going to add a Lambda function that is called misfits Lambda, which is actually being referred to in our blueprint itself. Cool. So it looks like this worked, right? So let's do apply blueprint and let's see how this changes our source code in the project. Okay, now this is the the existing API that we already had. This is now our misfits thing that we added. I'm going to see if I can edit this one to make it available, right? So I can add an alias here. Let's add misfits path, right? So this gives me the possibility to now see the difference between these two blueprints that have been added over here, right? Because it's the same blueprint, but it has different input parameters. You can see that there has been a pull request created, and this is the way that you can update and also add new blueprint structures to your existing projects. You will now see that this is really the same way that we have a pull request. In a normal way, if I would open that manually, it also once again will show the changed code. As you can see over here, there's some stuff that I still need to understand, right? This is not intended. I would not expect this to be existing or proposed. I would just expect this line to be added over here, because now in this project, I've been applying 3 different blueprints, and this is what I want to see over here. Same for the README. I don't know why this is existing and proposed, but I'm sure that I will find out how to resolve that as well going forward. So with that, I'm going to merge this one, and my source code will be updated for this project. And also I will hopefully see that there's new workflows being added to this one. So let's have a look. Now let's see if we go to workflows now, and if we focus on the main branch for this repository, we will now see that we have a sub workflow for misfits. We have that security workflow, which just triggered because we pushed to main. We have the sub workflow for the details, which is the other path that I've added. And we have the main workflow. Oh, that had this an error, so I need to go back and fix my workflow over here. And we also have a main PR workflow that has an error here as well. And I also need to update that. That's the introduction to the project that we're building. Now this is interesting, but it does not give you any code. So I'm gonna stop the recording here and let you wait for a few minutes until you hit the next session, which will dive deep into how are these different blueprint projects set up, and how we can maybe also learn from that to enforce that this security workflow is always the active one. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you learned a lot today in this short video, and that you give it a like, and also maybe subscribe to the channel to the playlist for the future updates that I'll be adding to this soon. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Hello and welcome again to this next video around custom blueprints in Amazon CodeCatalyst. And today we're going to once again look at our more complex project, where the idea is that we start from our custom blueprint master that we already have built in by the CodeCatalyst team. We're going to build an API gateway blueprint that has the main API gateway. We're going to build a blueprint that is able to add an additional path to an API gateway, and then we're going to have an additional blueprint focused on adding a security workflow to it. The project structures that we're looking to build kind of can be described as this one. As I mentioned, we have the API gateway blueprint, which has the main API gateway, the endpoint, and the Lambda function. And we have a security team blueprint, which focuses on a workflow. And we have a sub API blueprint, which can be added multiple times to this project. It consumes an API gateway ID and will attach a new endpoint, so a new path to the existing API gateway with either a Lambda function or DynamoDB behind it. And that will also include an additional workflow. We already looked a little bit into the details around how this works when setting things up. Now, this is the project created from that. From these blueprints, as you can see, there is the blueprint added once. There's 2 blueprints added that have an additional API, and there's the security team blueprint. Now, what I want to do today is I would like to look at the code that is behind this. So as I already explained before, all of these are separate projects, so I can clone them within my Visual Studio Code, and this is what we're going to look at. So we can see over here, it's we have this API gateway blueprint, and we have the additional API, and we have the blueprint of the security team. Let's start with the easiest one, because this is the blueprint of the security team. This really is meant to just only add one workflow. As we looked at before, we have a source file. We do have a static assets file over here. It's not yet cleaned up from all of the stuff that we don't need anymore, right? But in theory, we should not have any static assets here, but maybe some documentation. The blueprint itself, however, has an option, which options parameter, which takes as an input the environment and the AWS account name and the role to be used. This is just because we might need that when accessing our security tools going forward. And then what it does is it interacts with the context object of the blueprint. And this is a very fantastic, cool thing that you can use to look at how does the project look like that you're generating into, or how is the content of the blueprint look like that you're generating into. So if you look into the information that you have over here in the context, you will see a space name, you will get an environment ID, you get a phase of recent synthesis, branch name, root directory, root directory, npm configuration, a package configuration, and the project information. In our use case today, we're going to interact with the project object. This project object then has details around source folders. It has information about repositories that you have. And this is also what we're going to use over here, right? So we have, we're going to list the repository names. That's what we're doing here. Then we are verifying if there is a repository already added to this project. If yes, then if no, well, if there is more than one, we're going to throw an error. This is a way to handle requirements for the blueprint. And if the length is null, is 0, we cannot assume that there is a source directory created. So we're going to create it over here, right? But ideally, we would be reusing the existing source repository name of the project to then, and this is the cool part over here, we're building our security workflow, which is going to be triggered when things are being pushed to the main directory. As you can see, it's not really meaningful yet, but I really want to show you the concept on how to do that. One additional thing that is important here, we have set up the recent strategies. This means that every time that this blueprint is going to be used, we're going to be overwriting the workflow as well. And I think that's important as well when we look at how this project is being built. And as I can see, I've not implemented it in the way that I wanted it to be. So I think we need to change that a little bit, right? So this one gives the recent strategy for the added blueprints, but it does not set the same thing up for our workflow that we have been creating, right? And this is what we also want. We want others to not update these, be able to update this workflow, right? We want the security team to be the owner of the current workflow. For security workflow, this is going to be in the, when it's generated, it's going to be in the CodeCatalyst, and then, so .CodeCatalyst and workflows. And then the workflow name is going to be the one that we add over here, right? So I'm going to make sure that this is then also going to be the name of this one. Okay. We will also always update this. So what the blueprints also do is that they empower you to build an ownership file. So you can use this blueprint ownership file to ensure that code owners is being created, and we're going to add that here as well. So Okay. Now we have done a change. Let's have a look on how this blueprint generates out stuff. The way that you do that is, as I think I already showed you before, in the terminal, you're going to execute npm run or yarn if you want to blueprint preview, which is going to generate, oh no, not preview, sorry, this was blueprint, and then synth was the correct command, which is now going to synthesize your blueprint locally and to this directory. So now we hopefully will see that there is a CodeCatalyst file generated. That is the security workflow, which contains our workflow, but we also generated an ownership file, which now tells us that we are forcing the security workflow by this blueprint, and this is forcing this file to be not changed by anything else. And also other blueprints will now respect this ownership file going forward. So that's one of the tips that I think you should be aware of when building your own blueprints. Another thing that I did over here is, as today, blueprints do not have a possibility to see which other blueprints have been added to the project already, but this might be interesting for some of the integration stuff that we want to do. I've created my own added blueprints JSON that I'm updating here, and where I will see information about the added blueprints to this project. So if we look over here, we should have this file generated, which now has the CodeCatalyst blueprint only over there. Cool, so this is the security blueprint, which is the easiest one, and looking at the clock I can see that I only spent 9 minutes talking about this, which actually shows how complex building blueprints can be. All right, gonna be a little bit quicker when looking on the others. So let's look at the API gateway blueprint, which is the main API gateway. To remind us what that means, we're gonna look at the picture again. This is a CDK project that contains an API gateway, contains an endpoint, contains a Lambda function, and contains some workflows, right? And I'm highlighting the fact that this is going to be a CDK TypeScript project, because I think that this needs to be improved a little bit more when working with blueprints. Once again, let's start looking at the source file, and in the blueprint over here, you can see that it starts once again with options. We are defining a source repository name, which we can set in the options dialog. We will then copy all finds from the static asset directory again. We are then adding a workflow for the main branch, adding a workflow for the PR, and that's about it, right? Adding the workflows, I will not go into details, but you can add any kind of steps that you want to do. The main challenge for me now here is that within the static assets directory over here, what I do have in fact is a TypeScript project that actually needs to be able to work and compile afterwards, right? So what I've done in the static assets directory is I have a package JSON, I have a tsconfig, I have a CDK JSON, I have an API gateway, which is the stack itself, right? So this is our API gateway stack. And I have a bin, which would be the CDK application that is actually going to be triggered. What you see, and this is one of the things that I don't really know yet how to resolve, that is, in this folder, this project cannot and is not compiling, right? And that's one of the problems over here, that it's really hard to triage whether the project is actually, whether it compiles, whether it has problems or not. So the test cycles are pretty long. You also see that here I can write plain CDK code in the way that you would also want to do that. I have this HTTP API, which I'm creating, which is an API gateway. I have one integration that points to a Lambda method. I'm adding that root. That Lambda method then is in our Lambda folder and is supposed to expose all of the roots that are currently added to the existing API gateway. That's cool, because we will then see how many of our sub APIs have we added to this project. Now, let's look at the sub project. This is, you can see this as a pattern, because you can do that with other stuff as well, with other similar examples as well. Over here, we now have, once again, the options. The options is only environment and account connection. We actually wouldn't need that, but because we could assume that it's already there. Then we have the main API ID here. This is also, once again, we could assume that we can get that from the project. Today it's not possible because we cannot access deployments from a workflow. And then we have the sub API path, which would be our target. If we look back into how this looks like over here, right? The sub API path is one's details and one's methods, just to have this as an example. This means I can add the same blueprint multiple times, and after adding it twice, I would now expect the info path in the API gateway, the details path in the API gateway, and the misfits path in the API gateway. The blueprint then starts again with checking if there is a repository added. If there is no repository added, it will create one. Then it does something that is called a substitution asset. Right, so it is able to, we are able to within blueprints do mustache submissions or substitutions, and what that means is that the moment that this thing is reading this markdown files over here, right? Here we have a sub API path. What this will replace a variable sub API path that we see over here, denoted by these two variables with inputs that I'm giving to that piece, right? And essentially that's what I do over here, right? I set up this variable and give it the subpath over here. And this is what I'm then also using when creating the stack and the lambda function for the sub API, because it cannot be named the same. It needs to be named different. So I'm reusing that. And now it gets complicated because this means that in the static file that I'm using here, I need to have the sub API path as part of my actual CDK code. So how does this look like? Over here, I do have my sub API stack. My sub API stack is then sub API path, right? And I'm using that as part of the ID and as part of the path when calling this construct. The construct, however, has specific things. It can be a Lambda or a DynamoDB integration. I can choose that based on the input parameters that the user gives to the blueprint. Pretty complicated stuff, I would say, right? And I think this is where also I see that building custom blueprints will become more difficult going forward. It's very difficult, and you really need to pick the use case on how you want to look at building blueprints. So I would leave it with this right now, giving you a short introduction on how this blueprint actually looks like. And I would want to, as last part of this video, show you how does the project look like that it created out of this one. So here I have now this project, which is called From API Gateway Blueprint, and I will show you first the workflows that have been generated. You will see that we have multiple workflows here. We have the main API workflow, we have the main PR API workflow. Those are the two that are being created by the main blueprint. We then have the sub workflow for misfits. We have the sub workflow for the details, because those are the two types that I've added this blueprint so far. And then we have the security workflow, which is the workflow that's created from the security blueprint. Now, let's try this for another time. So what I can do, as I mentioned, I can go over here and add a third time this blueprint. And I really hope that this is not going to fail, as I did not test that before. So I'm going to select this one as an additional API. And I will give it a parameter that I will call recording. So there's still work to do, because ideally I would not need to submit this generated API ID. I would just read that from the project. That's not possible. By adding a recording over here, I can now see what will be generated. And as you can see, I will see the recording stack. I will see the recording lambda function. Once again, I can get the construct over here that will be generated. And I also see the workflow that will be generated over here. Brand new and just released yesterday is the logs tab. So I'm now able to see the logs of my project synthesizers, right? And this is really helpful if you have problems in the generation of the project source code, right? So this is really cool addition that the team added over the last days. So let's apply this blueprint. I'm gonna make sure that I select something here. And let's click on Apply Blueprint. This is going to take 1 or 2 more minutes. And then we're going to hopefully see in our project that now we have a combination that has a third API gateway included. And I'm going to show you that by doing a git pull on my local directory, right? So now we should be seeing that there is another entry over here, but I might need to reload that. Oh yeah, there we are, right? So this is now the alias. The head has not been added over here. Let's do that quickly. Edit alias is recording, so we kind of keep track of what parameters, input parameters we had for this version. We also saw that there is a pull request created, which we will need to approve now. We can see what happened, what the options are, what has been changed. We can also see the files, the code that has been generated. So I'm just going to quickly click on merge as we have seen that before. This is going to now show me the merge screen. And now I have my API gateway from Blueprint, and let's do a git pull. And now we will see that there is new files coming in, and these new files are essentially the recording lambda and the recording stack that we have, which now will be showing up in my Visual Studio Code as well. So I now have in the source file over here, I have lambda, I have the details, the misfits, and the recording lambda. As you can see over here, we are not doing anything meaningful here, and that's not the point. In the stack, we will see now that this is now the recording path. The path that we're submitting to the construct is recording. The backend is assuming to have a lambda function as well. And now we see that in this project, we're also going to get highlighted the problems that we have. And this is not working out, right? So I would need to add here a construct parameter to include this. And then I get the next headline, which says I need to do a new. And that's what I faced when developing blueprints being a real issue, right? You only get the real compile and error messages after you have created a blueprint project out of your blueprint, and you don't have the possibility to see that within building the blueprints. And here I think it's very early stages for the custom blueprints in CodeCatalyst. There will be some improvements that make that easier, and looking forward to see them coming in going forward as well. So let's look back at what we built. We built 3 custom blueprints in this project in the last 20 minutes. One of them has an API gateway. The other one adds an additional path to an existing API gateway. And the last but not least, the most important one, adds a security workflow to our project. Now, this project is consisting of multiple blueprints over here. It generates one code base. It generates one set of workflows that you can actually then also use and interact with, where you can really also force stuff to be included over there, right? And I think this is pretty powerful. There's a lot of integration patterns that you could think of. And yeah, I would encourage you to give it a go. And if you hit up any problems and questions with the custom blueprints, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or maybe even also use the comments here on YouTube. Looking forward to be part of your CodeCatalyst Blueprints journey with you, and looking forward to see what you build. I have a lot of cool ideas on what blueprints can do. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching. And if you liked this type of content and the details that I've been giving, please subscribe to the channel. If you do have anything that you would like me to dive deep into and then present or give you guidance on, please let me know. Looking forward to make you successful with using custom blueprints or using CodeCatalyst in general, or even CI/CD. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.